We are just starting about like 10 minutes late here. We had about 150 people RSVP, so we're kind of just going to let people filter in, get started 10 minutes late. And first, we're going to start with a little meditation. And then we're going to switch it over to Marcia for a beautiful sound healing. And then we're going to bring our panel up to have a discussion. And then we're going to close with some nice community sharing in groups of 3, so it can be some kind of intimate way to kind of feel supported by each other and get to know one another. So with that, I'm going to have you close your eyes and plant your feet on the ground. And just allow yourself to arrive here. Let your feet settle into the floor and feel the weight of your body being held without effort, without doing. Take one slow breath in through your nose and a longer breath out through your mouth. And again, inhale gently. And exhale. Exhale as if you're setting something heavy down. And release. There's nothing to fix, nothing to prove, no one to impress. Just arrive here. Bring one hand, if it feels right, to the center of your chest. Not to change anything, not to do anything. Just be, just listen. And beneath the roles you carry, the responsibility, the vigilance, there is a steady, quiet presence that has been with you your entire life. Let yourself feel that presence now. And imagine the heart not as something fragile, but as something vast, a spacious inner room, a field, an ocean. And with each breath, that inner space widens, making room for all of you. If there is tightness, let it be there. If there is grief, let it be there. If there is strength, let it be there too. You do not have to curate your inner world. It is okay exactly how it is. Now, continuing to close your eyes, become aware of the energy of the people around you. You are here, in this room, with women who are also carrying quiet struggles. Lives shaped by love and loss, by birth and death, by endings they didn't choose and beginnings they didn't expect. Some are holding worry, some are holding hope, and some are simply tired. You don't need to know their stories to honor their humanity. Now come back to your heart. Imagine your heart again, gently widening, making room not just for yourself, but for the shared truth of being alive together here on this planet. There's no fixing, no comparison, no performance, just this quiet recognition. I am here, and so are you. Now let a soft, steady warmth spread through your chest, starting with a small ball of light, and allow that ball of light to get bigger and bigger and to envelope your entire being. And then watch it radiate throughout this entire room to touch everyone in it. And allow yourself to soften without losing your strength. You belong here, and you don't have to carry everything by yourself. Now take one final breath in, and one deep breath out. And now we will Om together, feeling the collective energy of the room as one. Take a deep breath in and Om. And one more time, deep breath in, and Om. And you can continue to close your eyes to be in this space, or choose to open them to be present in this space. And I want to just welcome everyone. And before anything else, I want to invite you to arrive into this space. This MIT chapel was designed for peace, not for productivity, not for optimization, not work, not for certainty, but for perspective. And for humility. And for remembering that human intelligence has always included more than calculation, but something contemplative, something moral, relational, and deeply felt. And tonight, more than ever, that remembering of a quiet inner strength and faith is deep in our soul, and it matters. We're all living through a time of widespread uncertainty and unprecedented change. Technological acceleration, artificial intelligence reshaping work, power, and identity, political instability, climate disruption, grief, and a level of burnout that feels pervasive and chronic. And in the middle of all of this, a lot of women are holding everything together quietly. They're holding teams, they're holding families, they're holding emotional labor, and they're holding long-range consequences while being asked to move faster, decide quicker, and organize more. And it's not incidental that women are holding so much of this moment. For millennia, women have been the primary stewards of new life, care, continuity, and communal survival, tending to the young and the dying, holding relationships and meaning together. And today, women still carry a disproportionate and often invisible share of emotional labor, caregiving, and off-the-clock responsibility. That is a burden, and it is also a superpower. Research consistently shows that women leaders on average score higher on emotional intelligence, systems thinking, and long-term risk awareness. Women-led businesses are more likely to be impact-oriented, community-centered, and values-led. And research also shows that women tend to lead relationally rather than extractively. And as leaders, they act as multipliers in our societies. When women advance, they are significantly more likely to pull others up with them, sharing resources, mentoring peers, and reinvesting opportunity back into teams and communities, and increasing collective capacity rather than hoarding influence. And in times of change like this, these qualities are essential. So when the ground feels unstable, the instinct for a lot of us humans is often to harden, to polarize, and to retreat into numbness or outrage, to close down, to close our hearts, to harden, and brace for impact. And the other is to try to stay open at all costs, to bypass rage, to bypass and smooth over conflict, or rush toward peace before we've actually metabolized what's actually happening. And so a lot of spiritual traditions, they remind us that wisdom isn't about avoiding suffering, but about how we relate to it. So that the heart must be both vast and grounded, able to touch suffering without being overwhelmed, and able to see beauty without turning away from the pain. So what we're practicing here in our lives is the murky middle between closing down and bypassing and staying present with what is, letting grief, anger, and fear move through us without allowing them to harden our hearts. So this gathering tonight is not about answers, it's about orientation. When systems are changing this quickly, the most important leadership work isn't always decisive action. Sometimes it's discernment, pausing long enough to ask, What kind of future are we actually building together? Where is our energy being directed? And how do we stay in relationship with ourselves and one another when things feel complicated or unresolved? So the title of tonight's gathering is Women Holding Wonder, and that word wonder is intentional. Wonder keeps us from collapsing complexity into certainty. It keeps us curious and open to another's point of view. It allows us to surrender with grace to the tides of change. It keeps ethical reflection alive in moments of speed and power. And in the age of AI, wonder may be one of our most important leadership capacities. AI is not just a technological shift, it's a mirror reflecting our values, assumptions, and blind spots. And these systems are shaped without women, without ethical grounding and lived experience. And if they're shaped without women, the future will inherit those absences. That's why AI-powered women exists. We convene women across disciplines to actively shape the future of AI through responsible innovation, leadership development, and human-centered transformation through our conferences, our academy, our certification programs, and our work with organizations and a thriving community of women. So tonight is a reminder that leadership is not only cognitive, it is embodied. And it extends far beyond our workplaces into our communities, our families, and our relationships. So this evening is an invitation to slow down, to listen beyond the noise, to reflect without needing to perform, and to be in conversation as women are carrying insight, responsibility, and care into the world every day. So you don't need to fix anything tonight. You don't need to improve yourself. You don't need to be certain. You only need to be here present together. So thank you for holding this moment with us and the world beyond these walls. And with that, we will hand it over to Marcia for a beautiful sound healing. So tonight's panel brings together women leaders who each hold this moment from a different place. So ethics, mental health, systems, spiritual care, not to explain AI, but to reflect on the human experience underneath our changing world and systems. So what connects these voices is a shared vantage point. Each works closely with the consequences of rapid change as it shows up in work, family life, and community, especially in the unseen labor of holding others steady when things feel uncertain or quietly falling apart. So many women find themselves carrying responsibility across roles at once, as leaders, mothers, sisters, partners, friends, and community stewards, often without much space to tend to their own existential questions. This is a contemplative conversation about uncertainty, responsibility, and meaning, and how we orient ourselves when answers are incomplete. So I'm going to just quickly introduce each of our panelists. So Reverend Claire Feingold Thoryn, she is our meaning holder on the panel, and she is a Unitarian Universalist minister and a graduate of Harvard Divinity School, where she also teaches currently. She brings a perspective that comes with standing with people at the most vulnerable and meaningful moments of their lives. And because of this, she has a rare vantage point. She sees patterns across generations, across families, across moments of societal stress, what people are afraid of, what they're grieving, what they're trying to protect, and what they quietly hope for when the world feels unstable. And then we have, make sure I have this in the right order here. We have Jen. Yes, Jen Serena. She is a responsible futurist on our big panel. So as a steward of the future of work and human systems, she brings a grounded, inside the system view of how technological change, including AI, actually reshapes hiring, culture, power, and belonging inside organizations. She focuses on how leaders build and scale companies without quietly dehumanizing the people inside them, and what human-centered innovation really requires when speed and growth are rewarded. She is founder and CEO of Workflow, where she directs with early stage and scaling startups on hiring, culture, and organizational design. She has spent years inside fast-growing tech companies, often before people systems exist, watching what breaks first when ambition, innovation, and constant change collide. So what she brings to this conversation is not prediction or theory, but lived pattern recognition from the front lines of building organizations in moments of disruption. And last but not least, we have Dr. Marissa Alert. She is the nervous system translator on our panel. And Marissa is a licensed clinical health psychologist who works closely with high-achieving professionals, executives, and leaders navigating stress, burnout, anxiety, and identity strain. What makes her perspective especially resonant tonight is that she understands both sides of the equation, the internal demands of high performers and the external pressures of fast-moving, high-stakes systems. So her work focuses on helping people stay psychologically intact, clear, grounded, and values-aligned inside environments that often reward constant output over human sustainability. So with that, we will begin our conversation. All right, so I'm going to start with Claire. So from where you sit, walking with people through illness, loss, grief, aging, family rupture, and uncertainty, where do you sense people actually are right now? Beneath the surface of all the competence and busyness.
Thanks, Felicia, and it's really wonderful to be here. Well, I think people are having a hard time right now. And in addition to teaching, I also serve a congregation in Lexington, Massachusetts. And, you know, there are people there of all ages, babies to elders in their 90s. And a lot of people are struggling, seeing the world that they thought was going in a certain direction turn around and go in a different direction. And among all of everything that's happening in our world, everyone is still dealing with their regular lives. That includes car accidents and illness and deaths of loved ones and the challenges of parenting. So I see people struggling every day and just doing their best to take care of their loved ones and themselves.
Thank you for sharing that. And I guess when it comes to meaning and uncertainty in an accelerated world, when the pace of change feels overwhelming, technologically, politically, culturally, what do you notice people struggling with the most when it comes to meaning, stability, and how they orient their lives?
I love this question because I serve a community that has been around since 1840, right? And so it has seen a lot of technological change. It saw the birth of the telephone and email and cars and flight in the air. So they've seen a lot of change. And I think one of the things that I love about church community is that, in fact, we kind of joke about it sometimes, there's the speed of church, which is slow. Change happens slow. And so you're always kind of trying to help people with change because change is inevitable. If we don't change, we'll die. If we don't change, we'll just calcify. And sometimes it's just disappointing people at the rate that they can stand. But I think that in a community, we're helping each other with all the changes in the world. There's so much rapid change. And so what I see people struggling with the most sometimes is the little things that they want to control or they think they can control. And yet even those things sometimes become hard to control, like what a certain room looks like or what their child has chosen to do after school, things like that. Because it hits their sense of autonomy, like I should be able to control this. This is a thing I should be able to control, and I can't. And so you see the crash out from that instead of the larger things, because the larger things, well, I can't control those things. And so it's about trying to remember to be kind to each other amidst all of this change.
And are there any areas that you're seeing like help pick people up in those situations? Because I mean, obviously it sounds like the macro is affecting the micro, right? And so how are you seeing people navigate that well? Like, are there things that you're seeing that are helping the community and helping from, because you bring kind of that spiritual perspective on the panel, like are there things that are kind of a North Star that are helping lift them up right now? I mean, with all of the turmoil and change and uncertainty, what are you finding helps?
Yeah, I think it's so important to find the micro joys amidst the macro grief. And there are so many ways to do that every day. And the thing that I always want to offer people that I hope people take, there's lots of ways to find joy alone, looking at the sky, taking a walk, but it's so much more powerful to find joy with other people, to laugh with a friend, to laugh in community, to sit in silence and listen to that beautiful music communally. It's so much more meaningful to do that with everyone in this room as we're all hushing our breathing, as we're all listening. Everyone's having their own powerful experience, and we're doing it together. That to me is so powerful. And so I think whenever you can, to be with people face to face, in rooms, strangers, friends, to find times to laugh, that's, I think, how we get through this.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I guess a congregation provides that intentional space to come together. Yeah, yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. And next we move on to Jen. So from your vantage point, inside startups and fast-growing organizations, what do you see breaking first as AI and technological change accelerate, often before leaders even realize there's a problem?
Yeah. I'll actually do a quick check with the room. Raise your hand if you currently work at a tech company. Okay, quite a few number. And then keep that hand raised if everything is like super stable right now, entirely predictable. Everyone is, what happened to all the hands? It's a really funny time right now, I think. And the nature of tech kind of does mean it's a very cyclical business, but boy, this one's a topsy-turvy one. I'll say from observation, there's kind of like two main areas that I'm seeing as early signs. So it's the people systems, and then this metrics-based quantity over quality culture. So I'll try to explain both real quick. Tech companies, they can get away with a lot when it comes to products and financials, even a brand. You can fake a lot, but you can't really get away with shenanigans when it comes to people systems because your employees are right there in the building with you, and it's kind of like, that's weird. What's going on there? So what I mean by people systems is things that really affect employees, the humans that work there. So whether that's hiring processes, performance reviews, the trends that I'm hearing a lot, tech has always been very like, what are the shortcuts? What are the hacks? But with the advent of AI, it's kind of blowing everything up right now. So I hear a lot of sentiments like, do I really need to attend this interview? Can this AI agent do it for me? Do I really need to write this job? It's so boring, job descriptions. Can I just feed it through Claude or whatever? And here's the thing. We are outsourcing our ability to really do quality people work that really erodes our ability to long-term, actually produce quality. I actually saw a very funny post from Anthropic. They did not mean for it to be funny. I just found it funny. So Anthropic published a blog post last week saying that they are actually struggling, and they're kind of really showing the trial and error of improving their own hiring processes. Because it turns out, shocking, the people, specifically for take-home interviews and their recruiting process, it turns out people that are applying to Anthropic are using AI to cheat on their take-home test. I know, who could have seen this coming? So Anthropic, like many of these companies, are like, oh, because they never actually figured out how to get the fundamentals of hiring right. We're now creating the system where who can hack it together, who can kind of make things up and kind of cheat their way. So this is really, I think, one area that the companies are starting to see. You might be selling one thing when it comes to the products, but you can't really get away within the people systems if you haven't gotten the foundations right. The second area, real quick, it's really around kind of, I think, this technology, this whole culture around. I think so much of it is like the difficulty of showing and actually creating value. Like, is my company actually creating something of value? Are we serving customers? Versus are we trying to appear like we're creating value so we can fundraise to the next round, get the VCs impressed, get the Twitter crowd talking. And like similar with the people systems, I really do worry that because we've created a world where success equals activity. It's like, are you busy? Are you creating a lot of sales leads, lines of code, versus like actually solving problems, actually meeting customers' needs? And because we've been operating that for so long, now with AI, we're going through this like really shakeup where everything can kind of be faked. So what does that mean for us? I think we're gonna need some time to really figure this out. But again, in the meantime, it's the companies that really kind of protect the ability to do quality work, not just fall for the trends right now. And it turns out, shockingly, like Felicia was saying, that it's the women leaders who are really leading that charge.
Yeah. And this next question is kind of around, I guess, human-centered innovation. So a lot of organizations say they value people while simultaneously pushing speed and efficiency and constant adaptation and going faster, faster, faster. So where do you see the biggest gap right now between human-centered values and how companies actually operate?
Yeah, I'll tell a super quick story about this, actually. So I moved to Cambridge less than a year ago from Bay Area, so right in the thick of things. And I was talking with a VC friend of mine on the phone. She's one of the good ones, the ones who's actually like a really like nice person and not a venture capitalist. Am I right? Okay. So she was saying, Jen, you left San Francisco at the perfect time. And I was like, what do you mean? And she goes, the vibes are so weird here right now. And I know it's a different market in Boston and in education, but there are some trickle-down effects, I think, just the nature of tech being so centered in San Francisco right now. So what she meant when I asked her more to clarify is that because there's so much fear around this being a bubble, when's it happening, what could happen to all these companies? So I think there's this kind of discrepancy between purported company values, like this is how we are operating, this is what we care about, versus the unspoken values of how decisions are actually getting made, which is that executives in tech are really fearful. When's this bubble gonna burst? How are we gonna make sure we get our exit? How are we gonna make sure we go raise the next round? And kind of like try to be safe for the next unforeseeable future. So I bring this up because I do think it's really creating a lot of dissonance for people, because whether you're an employee or kind of just part of the ecosystem or even job searching, you're seeing, again, the kind of like what companies are saying they value, like employees first or, customer obsession. And it turns out the super secret hidden value all along is money. Again, shock. And again, I think it's just like a very weird time. I do think things will kind of stable out over in the long run, but it is women leaders who tend to be, I think, have the foresight to see through some of this. And then the answer becomes, so what do I do about it? I think it's helpful to have some realistic expectation setting and try to figure out how to work in an imperfect system. If you work for maybe 1,000-person company, it's probably not realistic during all hands and be like, what about these values that we wrote down 5 years ago? Are we still acting on these? I just don't think a CEO is going to be like, thank you for that question. I'm going to be really vulnerable and be honest with you. I think it's more about recognizing the moment, recognizing the dissonance, and really try to keep your head in the game. Really think about sustainability in the long run and attend to your teams, the people around you. And you gotta stay in the game to be successful in it while recognizing this is a really weird time right now and you're not crazy. Like the values are in conflict right now.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think to mirror that, I mean, and we see this a lot at our conferences and the conversations we've been having around this is it's the bridge builders. It's the people that are able to use their head and their heart, and they're able to, bridge the business world into kind of like a new paradigm, a new leadership paradigm that isn't here yet, right? Because this is unprecedented, which means that in order for us to move forward and evolve, we have to move into a completely unprecedented domain. It's a new frontier for all of us. And sometimes the people that are best at navigating that are the ones where their qualities have not been accepted in the old terrain, right? So those qualities that are told to us that are, we're weak or soft skills or just kind of nice to haves are now like the essential skills, compassion and empathy and foresight, and be able to have collective understanding of the bigger picture of how this affects the whole team, the whole company, the whole society, the whole community. So yeah, it's really interesting. It's just very different, the type of skills that are required to navigate this. Okay, Marissa, let's move on to you. So Marissa, again, is our nervous system translator for this panel. So I guess the first question I have is around what this moment is doing to people internally. You go into businesses too and organizations and look at kind of like that macro, with the whole company, but you also work with the individuals that are inside those organizations and outside organizations too. I know you do all that work. And from your work with high performing leaders, especially, what do you see this moment of rapid change, technological, economic, and political, doing to people internally, even when they're functioning well on the outside?
Yeah, and I love that piece about functioning well on the outside, because I think we all do a fantastic job, especially as women, as looking as if we have it together and that we're functioning well. But one of the things that I'm noticing consistently across the board is that there's this underlying sense of uneasiness that's resulting from change being so rapid. And even if folks feel like, there's a lot of change, but there's also a lot of opportunity, because there's this need to constantly adapt, what it's doing to us in our nervous system is it's creating what we call allostatic load, meaning that we have to keep shifting, we have to be hypervigilant, we have to stay on top of things, and that's creating stress in our bodies. And a good way to think about it is like, let's say you have a typical route that you usually take to go home, but all of a sudden, every time you go home, the lane markers are shifting. So you know the direction you're supposed to be heading in. You're a good driver, right? This route seems familiar, but you can't relax. You have to stay alert because things are still shifting, even though there's a lot that still feels familiar. And what feels familiar in this moment might be the things like your job, right? Being a parent, being a caregiver, a spouse, a wife, the relationships that you formed. But at the same time, there's still much that's changing, and we're constantly needing to adapt. So how does that manifest? People might feel a lot more fatigued. They often share that there's this restlessness that's there. Can't really put their finger on it, but it's hard for them to be present and in the moment. Sleep starts to get affected, right? People aren't sleeping as deeply. And we sort of brush these things off thinking, you know what? It's probably this or it's probably that, not realizing that even if we think we're doing well, we are still being affected by everything that's going on. And our bodies and brains aren't used to such rapid change. And so it takes a toll on us. And the question then becomes, well, how do I stay afloat when all of these things are happening?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I guess it gets to the next question around burnout. And how do you understand burnout in this moment, beyond just too many hours? Like, what is that? How is that showing up for people right now? And how are they navigating that?
Yeah, I think in this context, burnout can be seen as Energy is being expended to stay on top of things, but the ability to restore ourselves, the ability to recalibrate, that isn't either happening as quickly as it should to ensure that there's balance, or if it is happening, it's not happening often enough. And so people are reporting that, again, they're still getting things done, but they're exhausted. And that exhaustion isn't a personal failure. It's information, right? It's a signal that how things are currently functioning may not be sustainable unless something shifts.
And so when I think about, all the different aspects of burnout, like what's causing it right now for people, there's, like we said earlier, there's a macro, there's a micro, right? And how it shows up in control and all these different areas of your life. But how do you find that people can actually slow down? Like when we think about in the context of AI, accelerated change, there's pressure for us to speed up, right? Like I can even speak to my career as a product leader, like leading product teams. I mean, we had to keep adding to our tech stack, one thing after another. And the promise was, well, it's going to ease your team. It's going to lessen the burden. It's going to speed things up. You're going to have all this time off now, right? But that's actually the opposite of what's happening. The more I add to my tech stack, the more tools I add, the more cognitive load I have to navigate the complexity, which causes more burnout. In addition to that complexity being amplified through global events and a lot of just change in other areas. But then, if you go into the simple thing like a tech stack and our work too, there's all the AI stuff as well. Mm-hmm. So how do you recommend people navigate that? And what can they do to actively slow down or even create boundaries in their life when everyone wants you to do nothing but speed up?
Yeah. One thing I encourage clients that I work with to do is to think about what is tension that you need to change and tension that you need to hold. And oftentimes when there's so much shifting, there's this urge to fix everything, to exert control over even what seems uncontrollable, because it creates a sense of safety, right? That's what we naturally want and desire: predictability, sustainability. And when those things aren't happening, we sometimes find ourselves clinging to the things that we can control. And Claire, you alluded to this in terms of the things your congregations and the folks that you work with might be feeling as well. And so what do I mean by tension that you should hold? How do I recognize that there are things that are shifting, but I don't need to engage in the same way that I historically have? Oftentimes as high achieving women, when the pressure builds, the need to push forward also builds, right? And it makes sense because that's what has allowed us to thrive. It's allowed us to excel, to climb the corporate ladder, to receive all the accolades that we have. And so striving becomes a natural response. But in these moments, when we're consistently striving, we know that that's going to lead to increased risk of depletion. And so how do I observe what's shifting around me? How do I observe that there's this need to constantly adapt, stay ahead, increase the tech stack, right? The capabilities, knowing that that's going to create even more work for me. How do I hit the pause button to reflect on, when all of this is happening, how can I lead powerfully in a way that doesn't lead to self-erosion? And the way to do that is to get really clear on what your non-negotiables are, what's really important to you. And when you're clear on that, instead of being a weather vane, you're like a compass. You always know what direction you're heading in. And if you're not clear on what those non-negotiables are, what's really important to you, every time a new challenge surfaces, every time a new project lands on your plate, you're like that weather vane, just constantly shifting and being reactive when things happen. And so by being centered and grounded and knowing what truly matters to you, what we know from research is that clarity allows you to deal with stressful situations in a way that supports your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. And people who have a strong sense of their values, they're a lot more resilient in the face of challenges. And they're able to not only set goals that are aligned with those values, but follow through on them. And so if you're thinking about what do I need to do to stay grounded? How do I lead in a way that doesn't lead to my self-erosion, where my needs, what's important to me, gets put to the side or on the back burner? Just spending a few moments reflecting on that can make a huge difference. And we know from studies that just 10 minutes of reflecting on your values can help people not only feel grounded, but to connect with what really is meaningful to them.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of going back to the basics, right? Of our inner values, our 5 minutes of meditation, just a little tiny things. Okay, and the last question is for everyone on the panel. So in the midst of all this responsibility and rapid change, where does wonder still find you? And what would it look like to protect even a small pocket of that wonder in your work or life, not as an escape, but as a source of guidance? Serena.
Is that for me?
Yeah, you
I do have the mic.
go first.
I'm like here looking at them, waiting to hear their wonderful responses. And so the question is, where does wonder still find me? It really comes back to the simple things. A few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to be in a location where I could see the stars. And my husband couldn't understand my fascination with seeing the stars. I'm like, come on out, like, let's look at the stars. He's like, it's cold. I don't want to be outside, but just take it in that moment of just being amazed at the fact that here we are on this planet, in this huge galaxy, in this universe, and still feeling a sense of connection to the world that I live in. And for me, wonder in that moment just came from noticing the small things. And I think, Claire, again, you alluded to this in terms of just finding those small joys. And for me, that often comes in nature. And with nature, that creates a sense of peace and calm for me. And that's something that I've just repeatedly gone back to over and over during the years, especially when things feel really tumultuous.
I actually recently heard something really interesting, the difference between awe and wonder. So they're actually very similar, but there turns out kind of a very kind of nuanced distinction. So they're both kind of, both senses help us connect to like very fundamental humanity, kind of gets us away from like, everyday like anxieties to like this feeling that you just described. And it turns out awe has a kind of quality of like vastness and unknown. So that's why when you look at the stars, you're just like, the galaxy is so big. That's the awe part of it. And wonder can be a little bit more technically limited, so that it is maybe like more in the everyday. The size you can kind of grasp, and not so much like the galaxy. So I'll actually give an example about wonder. This is not a very fancy sounding example, but it's an honest one. When there's all this like news going on in the world and the weather vane and the stresses, I just look at my cats. They don't know anything that's going on. And there's something just very comforting in it, because, I'll be like in my head spinning, like I should be doing this, I should be doing that. We make eye contact. And I just feel so much calmer. It also helps are a little bit stupid, but it's what makes them so cute. It just helps me be like, you have no idea what's going on. And it really helps me connect to just like their pure love. So highly recommend, pets, babies, nature, plants, whatever your flavor is, really trying to be present. It really helps me feel grounded.
I love it. Intimacy and ultimacy. We got a theology class here. So I think for me, one of the things that keeps me appreciating and having both awe and wonder at what it means to be alive is, and this is why I'm not that fun at parties, reflecting on death. But so there's actually there's an app for that too, called We Croak, and so one of the traditions in Bhutan, in the Buddhism tradition in Bhutan, is to reflect on one's death 5 times a day, and so there's an app that reminds you you're going to die 5 times a day, but it's so much of appreciating and finding gratitude and wonder is just remembering this life is really short that we're given, and we're here on this rock, plummeting through sky. There are so many civilizations of humans that have risen and fallen. Isn't that amazing? They lived, they died, they loved, they had families, and all we know is there's ruins in the jungle, and we dig and try to learn about them. And so what we're given is our time in this world, and to sit with people and hear their stories. So I'm incredibly privileged because that's the kind of work I get to do. I just sat with a family this week as they were saying goodbye to their 96-year-old mom, and told stories about her life, and the things she'd experienced were just amazing, would blow your mind. And what an honor and a privilege it is to just be alive and hear each other's stories and to be able to listen to each other. And I think that is what gives me joy, and that's what gives me just the ability to go on each day, is just the wonder in each human being.
It's so beautiful, thank you. And I'll add mine in too. It's actually death as well. There's actually
They're so fun.
Yeah, so fun. I know you guys didn't want to come to an AA talk about death, but Tim Urban is this really great blogger online, but he has this chart that you can print out, and I have it in my office, where you actually see your life in squares. And so each square represents, I think it's a week of your life. And so you can color code it and add all these things of like famous people that died, like Martin Luther King, I didn't know died at was 42 or something. It's like people that had these incredible, powerful lives, and they died young, but they did a lot with their time they had. And I had a near-death experience a few years ago, and it kind of reset my whole life as well. And so I think death is this beautiful thing to have a relationship with. It inspires me every single day. And I always get inspired. My husband's an astrophysicist and always talking with astronauts and things like that. And they always talk about the overview effect when you go into space and you see the Earth. And part of it is actually dying, because you're actually removing yourself from the only thing you know, which is this planet as a human floating through space, and you're actually removed from it. And you all of a sudden see everything you know, away from you. So it's kind of like dying. And they talk about how that shifts the brain, and they've done all these studies on it, and it's really fascinating. So in the midst of all this change, sometimes that ability to zoom out and remember the fragility of our time here, that it's not promised. And that all of this chaos we're in, other humans have been through their own version of it throughout history. So that actually is very comforting to me. Well, thank you for everybody's sharing and vulnerabilities and experiences. And we want to bring that into the rest of the room here. So we're going to end tonight by actually sharing with each other. So we're going to break out in groups of 3. So if you want to just find people near you, hopefully people that you don't know would be nice if you're open to it. And find your little 3-person pod. And then we have a few prompts we're going to ask you so you can share.